Well, it was an exciting round one of Mascot Madness with surprisingly low bloodshed, but still enough to keep fans entertained. Let's go to the highlights. It was a tough draw for the Jayhawks, whose flight and predatory nature could have taken them far in this tournament. Rambling Wreck was clearly the X factor for Georgia Tech, adding a dimensionality to their strategy that the one-dimensional Jayhawk strategy just couldn't overcome. 68-60 Yellow Jackets. On to the Gators versus Tigers. Numbers clearly played a factor here, as did the anthropomorphic nature of the teams. Normal alligators would have been at a considerable disadvantage being so low to the ground, but at 6 foot plus and being bipedal, plus the fact that there's 10 gators because they are playing as a married couple, so 5 times 2, they just overpowered the Tigers, 91-80 Gators. Bulldogs versus Ducks, one of the lower scoring games of the tournament. Both teams really just lucky to be here. I thought the power of flight would be more of a factor for the Ducks, but it didn't turn out that way. Looks like 68-60 Bulldogs. The Michigan Wolverines with a one-sided victory over the Panthers in a surprisingly bloodless game. Some analysts say that the transitive, ill-defined nature of the Wolverines would be a disadvantage, but clearly that wasn't the case. 80-60 Michigan. And in another loss for flying animals, the world's most confused, most inland pirates overcame the power of flight in a neck-and-neck game over the Louisville Cardinals. Having overcome this hurdle, they have a terrifying matchup ahead of them against a train and 4 soulless, hard hat-wearing construction foremen. 91-90 Buccaneers in second overtime. The Boilermakers and their terrifying aura wiped the floor with what seemed like an explosive wild card in the tourney. The Aggies had both blue painted bulls wearing galoshes and knowledgeable agriculturalists on the floor. Against a team like, say, the Shockers or another crop-based mascot, the academics might have played a role, but as it stands, the Boilermakers ride the rails into the second round, 61-42. And whether it's due to the power of God's favor or just due to the fact that they were playing against ordinary, tame, friendly, live Bulldogs who happen to be able to do layups, the Friars are on their way to face the Irish in round 2, 70-18 Monks. And of course, the Fighting Irish granted Brutus Buckeye his lifelong wish for death, a death that ends the merciless suffering of a man whose head is a nut. Many onlookers observed that Brutus was just going through the motions and called it, quote, a difficult-to-stomach spectacle of resignation and surrender. 101-7 Irish. On to the West Regional bracket, where the Flyers, with their adorable little planes and the power of flight, made easy work of the mix of real and anthropomorphic steel taking the court for Texas. Charles Barkley in the Capital One studio had these guys going all the way, and this decisive victory here is making that look like a smart pick. 77-60 Dayton. A lot of speculation going into the matchup between the Sooners and the Wildcats that the Sooners' sense of manifest destiny was going to play a role one way or another, but it turned out that sense of destiny was just unbridled hubris, 66-65 in a close one, Wildcats. And then the Musketeers dug deep after most of their single-shot, long reload time muskets failed after killing only 2 Seton Hall Pirates. And they win the game really with just ball handling fundamentals, defense, and one for all and all for one mentality that led to the most assists in any game of the first round so far, 80-71 Musketeers. And, of course, the Cougars over the Huskies in a surprisingly close 11-6 game, which was cut short in the first quarter due to tragedy. Jonathan the Husky was a good boy, and he will be missed. And it's hard to say exactly what happened in the Creighton Blue Jays versus Oklahoma State Cowboys and Cowgirls game. The Jays were favored going in with superior ability rebounding and, again, the power of flight. But they lose 66-53 to the Oklahoma State Cowboys and Cowgirls. And the Texas Tech Red Raiders win in a squeaker 51-50 in overtime. The horses contributing both a height advantage but also a certain sense of clumsy horsishness on the court. And in a tough one for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, the NCAA Rules Committee is going to have to take a hard look at the rules and lax refereeing that led to this tragic and unconscionable 4-point to 3-point victory by the Tigers. The only saving grace was that the uniforms of the Scarlet Knights were already red to begin with. And in what turned out to be one of the most disappointing matchups of the tournament, many were anticipating the spectacle of 5 10-foot-tall regular-size elephants taking the floor, and were disappointed to find that instead they were 5, about human-sized mascots that just look like elephants. Still, the Crimson Tide fought valiantly before succumbing to the trickery and agility of the Blue Devils, 81-79. And now on to the Midwest bracket, where it's clear the mysterious and nebulous natures of the powers used by the Sun Devils during this contest, they're saving up a lot of that for the later rounds. They're not really showing a lot of what they can do. Still 112-31 Sun Devils. And finally, flight proves an actual decisive advantage as the Marquette Golden Eagles put it away 99-48 over the Indiana Hoosiers, which again are just 5 guys from Indiana. And as anticipated, the recent death of Tusk 4, the former mascot for the Arkansas Razorbacks, put a real fire in the belly of the Hogs as they cruised to a surprisingly easy victory over the Wildcats, 60-50. And in what has to feel like an extremely tough draw for the North Carolina State Wolfpack, they run into 5 copies of a famed tracker, hunter, and fighter in Chief Osceola on horseback. The Seminoles win 66-59. And of course, the Mountaineers win 88-48 against the Trojans, which were really just horses kind of clopping around out there, and they were spooked by a lot of loud noises. And in yet another disappointing performance by teams that can fly, the Iowa Hawkeyes lose to the Virginia Cavaliers 101-99 in overtime in what was an offensive slugfest with 0 block shots and 0 rebounds. And in another squeaker, the Penn State Nittany Lions win 77-76 over a mascot in the Shockers who is wheat-wearing clothing. No one is quite sure what's happening there, but whatever it is, it put on a respectable show, losing by just 1 point. And the Michigan State Spartans win 88-27 over the Yale Bulldogs because instead of facing the entire army of Persia in the Battle of Thermopylae, this time they were just facing 5 Whittle Bulldogs. And on to the Baylor Bears victory. There was no telling what the Billiken, a mysterious luck doll whose design came to its creator in a dream in 1908, was capable of on the court, magical or otherwise. They largely held their own, but couldn't eke out a victory against 5 Bear married couples, making for a formidable 10 Bears in total. Again, the Rules Committee is going to have to look at that for next year, who absolutely dominated in the paint. What was the score on that one? That was 100-80. Buffalo Illini, 85-77. And as the Wildcats learned in their 77-74 loss against the Richmond Spiders, 6 armed, 6-foot-tall spiders with web-shooting hind parts and climbing abilities are pretty good at basketball. And a fairly close 59-52 victory for the Houston Cougars, considering the mascots they were playing against were just portly representations of the color orange. And a focus by the Maryland Terrapins nearly exclusively on defense was not enough to stop the adorable Good Dogs from a comfortable, if low-scoring, 49-40 victory. Washington Huskies advance. After it became apparent that they were playing against rooted trees who had nearly no chance of scoring a basket in the Stanford Cardinal, the Buckies began doing a number of push-ups equal to their current score after each unchallenged basket. This tamped down what could have been a 400 or 500-point game, just to 88-2 Badgers. The Gophers win 112-111 in a game that somehow managed to be extremely boring despite going to 4 overtimes. And finally, a brutal display as early in the game, a sound addle-addle strategy by San Diego State knocked out 3 live Tigers early. The remaining Tigers ate all 5 San Diego State players, but not before the Aztecs ran up the score 8-4 in the first quarter before the match was called off. San Diego State somehow advances to round 2 with a fresh roster of players due to the magic of the big dance. Good luck to everybody in round 2. Remember to wash your hands, especially when they are covered in tiger blood.